Your Spectrum Climax locomotive is a precision instrument and can provide you with a lifetime of fun and enjoyment if it is well maintained. It is important that you follow the recommended procedures for lubricating the Climax before running it for the first time. After all, you wouldn't operate your car without oil. Don't run your locomotive without lubrication. Failure to follow these instructions could cause serious mechanical damage, so please watch and listen carefully. We suggest that you watch the video all the way through first before performing any lubrication. Then, when you have everything prepared, perform the lubrication with the video. This way you'll be sure not to miss any important parts along the way. First, get all of the items you need together to perform the lubrication. Find a large, sturdy work surface to hold your Climax. Your kitchen table or a workbench will do very well. You will also need a number 1 Phillips screwdriver, a cup for holding the screws which you will remove, a thick towel or a piece of foam which will act as a cushion for the Climax, a toothpick or a thin wooden dowel, and the necessary lubricants. We recommend the new Bachmann line of Easy Lube space-age plastic-compatible lubricants. On the towel or foam, gently lay the locomotive on its side so that the cylinder on the engineer's or right side is facing up toward the ceiling. We will be working on these areas: the rear and front power trucks, the slanted cylinders and valve gear on both sides of the boiler, as well as the complete drive line underneath the locomotive frame and boiler. Now you will remove the cover plate of the rear truck. But before you do this, notice the rubber plugs on the cover plate. These are quick access field lubrication plugs. To remove, grasp between your thumb and forefinger and pull. To replace the plugs, simply push them in. Now grasp the rear truck firmly. Using your screwdriver, carefully take out the screws holding the cover plate. Place all screws in a cup or other container to prevent them from rolling away. With your thumb and forefinger, pull off the cover plate. Now that we have exposed the gearbox, we are ready to lubricate the parts. Do not remove any other parts. This is adequate to perform all lubrication. It's also important to know before you start that over-lubrication is more damaging to any locomotive than no lubrication at all. We recommend using Bachmann Easy Lube space-age plastic-compatible lubricants, available at your local hobby retailer. With the gearbox exposed, you can see that there is lubrication on the parts. This factory-installed break-in lubricant is not sufficient to run your Climax. Our objective is to completely lubricate the motor bearings, axle bearings, all bearing surfaces, intermediate and idler gears, and apply additional conductive lubricant behind each wheel and on the ball bearing contacts to increase electrical pickup. To begin, take your Bachmann Easy Lube heavy-duty gear oil and place 1 or 2 drops on the bearing where the motor shaft passes through the metal motor support housing on each side of the motor. Put 1 drop of oil on each of the worm gears also. Next, put 1 drop of oil on each idler gear shaft and the area where the gear sits on the shaft. There are 2 idler axles for each drive axle. For the next segment, we'll be using Bachmann's Easy Lube heavy-duty gear grease. This space-age lubricant won't sling off or dissipate at high running temperatures. The best method to apply this material is by using a thin wooden applicator like this. If you don't have one available, then a toothpick or coffee stirrer will suffice. Place a liberal amount of grease on the gears, working it well onto the entire part. Also, put gear grease behind each wheel. When you operate your Climax, the grease will be distributed around and into the idler gears. Be careful not to overload or overpack the grease. You want to make sure that it is evenly coated all the way around on the gears. This lubrication is adequate for 20 hours of operation. Double check that you have lubricated all the required parts. Now we are ready to apply the conductive lubricant. Bachmann Easy Lube Conductive Contact Lubricant enhances electrical conductivity and will decrease the amp draw of your Climax by lubricating the rear of the wheels where the heavy-duty ball-bearing contacts carry electricity to the motor. The lubricant is highly concentrated. Just put 1 drop on the back of each wheel and the wheel tread. As a side note, you should perform this electrical conductive maintenance every 5 to 6 hours of operation or as needed. When operating outdoors under high temperatures and other environmental conditions, there is a lot of friction, wear, and evaporation. Friction is metal's worst enemy. Remember, you don't run your car without oil, so don't run your Climax without adequate lubrication. Make sure that the truck cover plate fits snugly in place by tapping evenly on the bottom of the plate. Replace the screws, but do not over-tighten, so the next time you lubricate they are easily removed. Remember, do not over-tighten the screws. Next, we will lubricate the driveline shaft. Using a moderate amount of grease, lubricate the shaft. Work the shaft in and out. Remove any excess grease. Additionally, add a small drop of heavy-duty gear oil and work that in also. The procedure for lubricating the front power truck is exactly the same as for the rear power truck. Just repeat the steps one by one. Now lubricate the power truck bearing surface with heavy-duty gear oil. This is the half-moon-shaped part on the bolster, located between the frame and the top of the truck. Now we will lubricate the exposed drive shaft bearing points under the center of the locomotive. Lubricate the exposed bearing surfaces using a moderate amount of heavy-duty gear oil. The drive shaft is one of the most important points on your Climax. It's from this point that all the power to the pistons is applied. It runs at a very high RPM, so keeping this part well lubricated is imperative. Using the heavy-duty gear oil, place 1 drop along all bearing surfaces of the exposed driveline. This includes where the drive shaft connects to the power trucks and the center gearbox. Be sure to also lubricate the flywheel drive shaft where it leaves the center gearbox and passes through the locomotive frame. Finally, add a drop of heavy-duty gear oil to all of the Stephenson valve gear linkage. Now bring the Climax to an upright position and lubricate all of the cylinder's moving parts and valve gear with a slight drop of oil. These include all piston rods, piston valves, and valve guides. Don't forget to do the cylinders and valve gear on both sides of the Climax. Do not over-lubricate. Now your Spectrum Climax is ready for track testing and many years of pleasant enjoyment. We at Bachmann recommend that for braking in, you run the Climax with little or no load at slow to medium speeds, checking to see that everything on the locomotive is operating properly. This is the way prototype Climax locomotives were brought into service. Don't forget to fill out your warranty card and send it in as soon as possible. And remember, the key to maintaining the Spectrum Climax for long life is to keep all the parts well lubricated. But too much lubrication is worse than no lubrication at all. Thanks, and enjoy your Bachmann Spectrum Climax.